My name is Roxanne, and I'm 32 years old. I never expected to inherit $38 million from my Uncle James, or that it would fracture my already strained relationship with my parents. When they demanded a share and called me ungrateful for refusing something, inside me broke and healed simultaneously. I smiled, walked away, and made a decision that would change all our lives forever. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my parents reacted when they discovered the entire donation was made under their names. Growing up as an only child, I always felt like I was performing on a stage rather than living in a home. My parents, Gregory and Diane, were successful professionals who valued achievements over emotional connections. Dad was a corporate attorney who specialized in mergers and acquisitions, while Mum headed the marketing department for a pharmaceutical company. On paper, we were the perfect American family, financially comfortable, well-educated, and respected in our community. But behind our perfectly maintained colonial house in Connecticut, there was an emotional emptiness that echoed through every room. My childhood memories aren't filled with warm hugs or bedtime stories. Instead, they're punctuated by phrases like, "An A- what happened to the other points?" or "Second place isn't something we celebrate in this house, Roxanne." Nothing I did was ever enough. I was a straight A student captain of the debate team and even qualified for state championships in swimming. Yet my accomplishments were treated as expectations rather than achievements. When I brought home awards, my parents would simply nod and ask about the next competition. There was always another mountain to climb, another standard to meet. The only genuine love and acceptance I received came from my Uncle James, my father's younger brother. He was everything my parents weren't: warm, encouraging, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Uncle James never married or had children of his own, so he poured all his affection into being the best uncle possible. "Roxy, yeah," he'd say, using the nickname my parents despised, "your worth isn't measured by grades or trophies. It's about who you are when nobody's watching." The contrast between Uncle James and my parents couldn't have been more striking. While my parents attended my piano recitals with stoic faces checking their watches, Uncle James would sit in the front row beaming with pride. He'd bring flowers regardless of how well I performed, insisting that showing up and trying my best was what truly mattered. My parents and Uncle James had a complicated history that predated my birth. From what I gathered through overheard conversations and family reunions, their relationship fractured when my grandfather died. There was disagreement over the family business, with my father wanting to sell it to a larger corporation, while Uncle James fought to keep it running as my grandfather had intended. My father won that battle, and the resulting windfall helped establish his career, but it created a permanent rift between the brothers. Despite this tension, Uncle James remained present in my life. He never criticized my parents in front of me, though I could sense his disapproval of their parenting style. When I turned 18 and was accepted to college, Uncle James offered me something: invaluable freedom. "I have a spare apartment above my bookstore," he told me one afternoon during my senior year of high school. "It's yours if you want it. No rent, no expectations, just a place where you can breathe." I accepted his offer without hesitation, igniting a firestorm with my parents. They couldn't understand why I'd choose to live in a shabby apartment instead of the prestigious dorm room they'd arranged at Yale. What they failed to understand was that I wasn't choosing an apartment. I was choosing unconditional support over perpetual judgment. The move marked the beginning of my adult life and the furthering of the divide between my parents and me. I studied psychology, specifically focusing on child development driven by my own experiences and the desire to ensure other children felt heard and valued. Over the next decade, our relationship deteriorated into obligatory holiday phone calls and tense dinners every few months. I attempted reconciliation several times, hoping that age and distance might have softened their perspective. I invited them to my graduation ceremony when I received my doctorate. They attended, but spent the entire celebration discussing how I could have chosen a more profitable field. When I opened my practice as a child psychologist, I sent them an invitation to the small office warming party. They declined, citing a charity gala they couldn't miss. Each rejection reinforced what I'd always suspected: I would never be a priority in their lives unless I lived according to their expectations. Uncle James, meanwhile, became even more of a fixture in my life. He sold his bookstore and pursued his passion for photography, traveling extensively, but always making time to check in on me. He was the one who helped me furnish my first official office space, who listened to my concerns about difficult cases, who reminded me that I was making a difference, even when progress seemed slow. "You're healing children by giving them what you never had," he told me once. There's no greater purpose than that. By my early 30s, I had established a successful practice, specializing in children dealing with anxiety and parental pressure. My relationship with my parents remained distant and formal. We existed in each other's lives without truly participating in them. I had come to accept this reality, finding fulfillment in my work and the family of friends I'd created for myself. Little did I know that everything was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in April. I was between sessions reviewing notes on a new client when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Dr. Roxanne Lawrence?" a solemn voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking. This is Officer Daniels with the Portland Police Department. I'm calling about James Lawrence. He's listed you as his emergency contact." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What happened? Is he okay?" The officer's pause told me everything before he even spoke the words. "I'm very sorry to inform you that Mr. Lawrence was involved in a fatal car accident early this morning. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the center line." The world around me blurred. My desk, my carefully organized office, my credentials on the wall, all of it faded away as the officer continued speaking, explaining details I could barely process. Uncle James, my rock, my true family, was gone. Just like that. No chance to say goodbye. No final words of wisdom or warm hugs. I don't remember ending the call, but I must have, because my next clear memory is of sitting on the floor of my office, back against the wall, tears streaming down my face. My assistant found me there an hour later, concerned when I didn't appear for my next appointment. The days that followed passed in a fog of grief and administrative tasks. I had to identify his body, a moment so surreal and painful that my mind still shies away from the memory. I had to arrange a funeral, notifying distant relatives and Uncle James's many friends. I called my parents, of course, leaving voicemails on both their phones when neither answered. "Dad, Mum, it's Roxanne. Uncle James died in a car accident yesterday morning. The funeral is set for Saturday at 2 o'clock at Westview Memorial. I hope you can make it." They never called back, and they didn't attend the funeral. Their absence created a conspicuous void in the front row where I sat alone, surrounded by strangers who shared stories of how Uncle James had touched their lives. Photographers whose careers he had encouraged. Former customers from his bookstore days. Neighbors who recalled his kindness during difficult times. Everyone had a story, a moment when Uncle James had made them feel special, valued, seen. Just as he had done for me throughout my life. After the service, as people shared memories over coffee and pastries, I found myself drawn to photos of Uncle James displayed around the reception area. His smile so genuine and warm, captured in various locations around the world, doing what he loved. In every image, he looked truly alive, truly present. I realized I wanted to live my life with the same authenticity, the same open heart. A week after the funeral, I received a call from Uncle James's attorney, requesting a meeting regarding his estate. I hadn't given much thought to material matters, assuming Uncle James had modest savings and perhaps his condo in Portland. The idea that there might be more hadn't crossed my mind. The attorney's office was located in a sleek downtown building, a stark contrast to Uncle James's casual bohemian style. Mr. Harrington, a distinguished man in his 60s, greeted me with a sympathetic handshake before guiding me to a conference room overlooking the city. "Before we begin, Ms. Lawrence, I want to express my condolences. James was not only my client, but also a friend. He spoke of you often and with great pride." I thanked him, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. I'd been doing that constantly, thinking I was composed only to find grief surging unexpectedly. "Now, Santaki," he continued, opening a leather portfolio. "We're here to discuss James's last will and testament. He was very specific about his wishes." He adjusted his glasses and began to read the formal legal document. I sat there, hands clasped tightly in my lap, as Mr. Harrington outlined the details of an estate I never knew existed. Uncle James, my humble, seemingly simple uncle, had amassed a fortune through savvy investments in tech startups, real estate, and his own surprisingly successful photography business. The total value of the estate, including liquid assets, investments, real estate properties, and personal belongings, amounts to approximately $38 million, Mr. Harrington stated matter-of-factly, as if he wasn't delivering news that would alter the course of my life. I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry, did you say 38 million? "That's correct. And as per James's explicit instructions, you are the sole beneficiary." My mind reeled. This couldn't be right. Uncle James lived modestly. His condo, while comfortable, was far from luxurious. He drove the same reliable car for years. He never flaunted wealth or spoke of investments. There must be some mistake, I stammered. Mr. Harrington smiled kindly. James anticipated your reaction. He left this for you as well. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. My name was written on it in Uncle James's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened the letter, unfolding several pages covered in his familiar script. My dearest Roxy, it began, and I could almost hear his voice in the words. If you're reading this, then I've moved on to whatever adventure comes next. Don't be sad for too long. I've had a wonderful life rich in experiences and love much of it thanks to you. You're probably shocked about the money. I never saw the point in flaunting wealth, but I was fortunate in my investments and lived well below my means. I never needed much to be happy. I'm leaving everything to you because you understand what truly matters. You've chosen a path of purpose over profit, of helping others despite the wounds you carry. I've watched you grow into an extraordinary woman who uses her own pain as a bridge to connect with children in need. This money isn't meant to change your life, but to amplify the good you're already doing. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. And remember that the greatest inheritance isn't in your bank account, but in your heart. I love you, Roxy. Always have, always will. Uncle James. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face again. Even in death, Uncle James had found a way to support me, to show his love and faith in me. The magnitude of his gift was overwhelming, not just financially, but emotionally. Mr. Harrington discreetly pushed a box of tissues toward me. Take all the time you need. We have several matters to discuss regarding the transfer of assets, but nothing that can't wait until you're ready. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. Thank you. I'm just processing. I had no idea. Few people did. James was private about his finances. He built his wealth quietly and maintained his simple lifestyle by choice, not necessity. As the meeting continued, Mr. Harrington outlined the specifics of my inheritance, several real estate properties across the country, a diverse investment portfolio, retirement accounts, and substantial cash holdings. With each detail, the reality of my new financial situation became more concrete, more undeniable. I left his office with a thick folder of documents and an even heavier weight of responsibility. Uncle James had entrusted me with his legacy, believing I would honour his values and intentions. As I drove home past familiar streets that suddenly seemed different, I wondered what this inheritance would mean for my life, my practice, and my future. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly it would expose the true nature of my relationship with my parents. The news about Uncle James's inheritance spread through my extended family like wildfire, despite my efforts to keep it private. I should have known better. Legal documents become public record, and in a family where status and finances are closely monitored, such information rarely stays confidential for long. My phone, which had remained silent when Uncle James died, suddenly lit up with calls and messages from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousins remembered my birthday for the first time in decades. Former neighbours from my childhood reached out to reconnect. Everyone seemed eager to renew our acquaintance now that I had joined the ranks of the wealthy. But the call that finally came through, nearly 2 weeks after the reading of the will, sent ice through my veins. My father's name appeared on my screen one evening as I was preparing dinner. "Roxanne," he said when I answered, his voice uncharacteristically warm. "It's been too long since we've spoken properly." 3 months, I replied, remembering precisely because it had been a stilted conversation on my birthday that lasted all of 5 minutes. "Your mother and I were thinking it might be nice to have dinner together this weekend. Our treat, of course. We could go to Le Méridien. You always enjoyed their chocolate soufflé when you were younger." I nearly laughed at the transparency of it all. I hadn't been to Le Méridien with my parents since high school graduation, and they'd spent the entire meal critiquing my valedictorian speech, rather than celebrating my achievement. "What's the occasion?" I asked, knowing full well, but wanting to hear him say it. There was a pause, a clearing of the throat. "Does family need an occasion to have dinner together?" "In our case, usually yes." Another pause. "Well, we've been reflecting lately on family bonds, the importance of staying connected. Life is unpredictable after all. How convenient that this epiphany arrived precisely when I had inherited a substantial fortune. But curiosity more than anything else compelled me to accept the invitation. Fine. Saturday at 7. Perfect. We're looking forward to it, sweetheart. The endearment so foreign coming from him left a bitter taste in my mouth. Saturday evening arrived and I selected my outfit carefully. Not to impress my parents, but to armor myself for what I knew would be a performance rather than a genuine reunion. I chose a simple black dress, professional and elegant, without ostentation. No jewelry except small pearl earrings Uncle James had given me for my doctoral graduation. Le Méridien was exactly as I remembered crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waitstaff moving with practiced precision. My parents were already seated when I arrived, both impeccably dressed and wearing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. "Roxanne, darling," my mother said, standing to ear-kiss my cheek. Her perfume, expensive and overwhelming, engulfed me momentarily. "You look lovely." My father stood as well, offering a stiff hug that felt like embracing a mannequin. "Good to see you. You look well." We settled into our seats, ordered drinks, and engaged in painfully forced small talk. How was my practice busy, I told them. How was their recent trip to the Hamptons delightful, apparently. The weather, local politics, a new exhibition at the art museum, all subjects carefully skirted around the elephant in the room. It wasn't until our entrees arrived that my mother finally broached the topic they'd been itching to discuss. "We were so sorry to hear about James," she said delicately, cutting into her salmon. "Such a tragedy." "Thank you," I replied. The funeral was lovely. Many people came to pay their respects. My father sipped his wine. We would have attended, of course, but we had that charity event in Boston. Impossible to reschedule. You understand. I nodded, not trusting myself to respond without bitterness. They hadn't even bothered with this excuse when I called to tell them about the funeral. "We've heard," my mother continued carefully, "that James was quite generous with his estate planning. And there it was, the real reason for this dinner. He left me his assets, yes," I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. My father leaned forward, setting down his fork. We were surprised to learn the extent of it. James always lived so modestly. Who would have thought he had accumulated such wealth? He was a private person. 38 million? My mother mused, as if testing how the figure sounded aloud. Such an enormous responsibility for someone your age. I was 32, hardly a child, but I let the comment pass. "I'm consulting with financial advisors." "Wise." My father nodded. "Though your mother and I could certainly offer guidance, I've managed substantial portfolios for decades after all." I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. "I appreciate the offer, but I have professionals helping me." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand, a gesture so uncharacteristic, it took all my self-control not to pull away. "We're just concerned, sweetheart. Such a large sum can attract all sorts of opportunists. Families should stick together at times like these." The irony nearly made me laugh. After years of emotional absence, they were suddenly concerned about familial bonds. "It's interesting," I said carefully, "that it took $38 million for us to have dinner together." My father's expression hardened slightly before he forced another smile. "That's unfair, Roxanne. We've always been here for you." "Have you? Because I don't recall either of you being here for me during my doctoral graduation, or when I opened my practice, or when Uncle James died." "We've been busy," my mother interjected, her tone cooling. "We have demanding careers, social obligations." As did Uncle James, I countered. Yet he managed to show up for the important moments. An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. My father broke it by clearing his throat and shifting tactics. "Roxanne, let's be direct. James was my brother. His success was built partly on family connections and opportunities that came through our parents. It seems only fair that some portion of his estate should remain within the broader family." "You mean with you?" "We're not suggesting anything inappropriate," my mother added quickly, "but perhaps a more equitable distribution. After all, what could you possibly need with $38 million? I set down my fork, no longer interested in pretending this was a normal family dinner. "What do you need with it?" "You've both had successful careers. You have a vacation home, luxury cars, retirement accounts." "It's the principle," my father insisted, his veneer of warmth completely evaporated now. "James should have considered the entire family in his planning." "Uncle James considered exactly who he wanted to consider," I said firmly. "His money, his choice." My mother's expression turned calculating. "You know your father could contest the will. As James's brother, he has standing." The threat hung in the air between us. I felt a surge of both anger and disappointment, though I don't know why I expected anything different. You could contest it. I agreed. But you'd lose. Uncle James was of sound mind, his will is properly executed, and he was explicit about his wishes. You'd waste time and money on legal fees for nothing. So you won't even consider sharing a portion of the inheritance, my father demanded, his voice rising slightly. After all we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. Provided financially for my basic needs. That was your legal obligation as parents. Love, support, acceptance, those were in short supply throughout my childhood. How dare you, my mother hissed. We gave you every advantage, every opportunity. No, I corrected her. You gave me every pressure, every impossible standard, every conditional approval based on my achievements rather than my character. My father's face flushed with anger. This is how you repay us, by becoming an ungrateful, selfish woman who hoards wealth while her own parents get nothing. The accusation stung, but it also clarified everything. This dinner wasn't about reconnection or family bonds. It was a transaction, an attempt to claim what they believed they deserved. I placed my napkin on the table and stood up. Thank you for dinner. I think we're finished here. Sit down, Roxanne, my father commanded, as if I was still a child to be ordered around. We're not done discussing this. I looked at them both, these people who shared my DNA, but who had never truly known me. Yes, we are. I'll use Uncle James's money as I see fit in ways that honor his memory and values, neither of which included greed or entitlement. As I turned to leave, my mother called after me, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, 30 years of sacrifice for an ungrateful child. You'll regret this selfishness, Roxanne. 8. I didn't turn back. I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, but once inside my car, I broke down. Not because I questioned my decision, but because I mourned the parents I never truly had the relationship that money had finally proven could never be salvaged. What I didn't realize then was that their campaign for my inheritance had only just begun. The weeks following our disastrous dinner brought an escalating series of attempts by my parents to get their hands on Uncle James's money. What began as uncomfortable but civil quickly devolved into something ugly and vindictive. At first it was daily phone calls, each more emotionally manipulative than the last. My mother would alternate between tearful pleas about their upcoming retirement and thinly veiled reminders of all they had sacrificed for my upbringing. My father took a different approach, sending lengthy emails outlining investment strategies that would benefit the entire family. Strategies that unsurprisingly involved transferring significant portions of my inheritance into accounts he would help manage. I responded minimally at first, then not at all as their tactics became more aggressive. This only fueled their determination. My cousin Melissa called one evening, her voice hesitant. Roxy, I'm not trying to get in the middle of anything, but I thought you should know. Uncle Gregory and Aunt Diane have been talking to a lawyer about contesting the will. A cold weight settled in my stomach. How do you know this? They mentioned it at Sunday dinner last week. They seemed pretty confident they could prove Uncle James wasn't of sound mind when he wrote the will. Something about him being unduly influenced. By me was the implication. They were preparing to accuse me of manipulating Uncle James for financial gain. Thanks for letting me know, Melissa, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There's more, she added reluctantly. They've been telling everyone in the family that you've changed since getting the money, that you've become entitled and selfish, that you threatened to cut them off completely if they didn't stop asking questions about the inheritance. None of which was true, but truth seemed irrelevant in their campaign to paint me as the villain. I thanked Melissa again and ended the call only to receive a text from my friend Sarah. Moments later, have you seen your parents' Facebook posts? Call me ASAP. I hadn't. My parents and I weren't connected on social media, a small boundary I'd established years ago to protect my mental health. When Sarah sent me screenshots, I understood her concern. My mother had posted a long, emotionally charged narrative about the pain of raising an ungrateful child who turns her back on family when blessed with fortune. Though she didn't name me explicitly, anyone who knew our family would understand the reference. Comments from their friends expressed sympathy and outrage on their behalf. My father's post was shorter but equally damaging, sad. When money reveals a person's true character. Blood may be thicker than water, but apparently not thicker than dollar signs. The public nature of their attacks was stunning. They had always been obsessed with appearances, with maintaining the facade of a perfect family. Now they were airing what they perceived as dirty laundry for all to see, sacrificing their precious image in their quest for a share of Uncle James's money. I was still processing this breach when a certified letter arrived from a law firm representing my parents. The language was formal and intimidating, claiming they had significant concerns regarding the circumstances under which James Lawrence's will was executed, and suggesting that a reasonable financial settlement could prevent protracted and public legal proceedings that would damage the family's reputation. It was extortion thinly disguised as legal concern. I immediately contacted Mr. Harrington, Uncle James's attorney, who reassured me that the will was ironclad. These are intimidation tactics, Ms. Lawrence. Your uncle anticipated possible challenges and took extra precautions. We have video documentation of him explaining his decisions, witnessed by multiple parties, and medical certification of his mental competency at the time of signing. His words were comforting, but the emotional toll of my parents' actions was becoming unbearable. I had lost Uncle James, the one person who had consistently loved and supported me, and instead of being allowed to grieve, I was fighting off attacks from the very people who should have been comforting me. The situation reached its breaking point on a Sunday afternoon when I returned home from grocery shopping to find my parents' car in my driveway. They had never visited my house before, not once in the 5 years I had owned it. The sight of their sleek black Mercedes parked beside my modest Subaru felt like an invasion. They were waiting on my porch, my father pacing impatiently, while my mother sat primly on the bench, her designer handbag perched beside her. Both looked out of place against the backdrop of my cozy craftsman home. "What are you doing here?" I asked, balancing grocery bags as I approached. "We need to talk, Roxanne," my father stated, as if arriving unannounced was perfectly reasonable. "You've been avoiding our calls and ignoring our attorney's letter. This has gone on long enough." I unlocked my door, not inviting them in, but knowing they would follow regardless. "There's nothing to discuss. Uncle James left his estate to me. That's the end of it." They trailed me into the kitchen, watching as I set down my groceries. My mother's gaze swept critically over my home, likely noting the simple furnishings, the lack of luxury items that would indicate I was indulging in my newfound wealth. "We're your parents," my mother said, her voice laced with indignation. "We raised you, educated, you provided for you. And this is how you repay us, by hoarding millions while we're trying to secure our retirement." I turned to face them, suddenly tired of the pretense. "Let's be honest. You both have substantial retirement savings. Dad's firm has an excellent pension plan, and Mom's investments have always performed well. This isn't about need, it's about want. It's about what's fair," my father countered. "James was my brother. That money should stay in the family." "I am family," I reminded him. "You know what we mean," my mother snapped. "Greg and I have been married for 35 years. We're established. We know how to manage wealth responsibly." I leaned against the counter, studying them both. "Why did you skip Uncle James's funeral?" The question seemed to catch them off guard. My father frowned. "We told you we had a prior commitment." "A charity gala," I recalled. "More important than your brother's funeral." "Don't twist this around, Roxanne," my mother warned. "We're not here to discuss James's funeral." "But it's relevant," I insisted. "You didn't care enough to attend his funeral, yet you cared deeply about inheriting his money. Don't you see how that looks, how it feels?" My father's expression hardened. "We had our differences, James and I, but that doesn't negate the fact that as his brother, I have a legitimate claim to a portion of his estate." "No, you don't," I said firmly. "Not legally, not morally. We could destroy you in court." My mother threatened, her composure slipping. "We have friends in high places, connections you couldn't begin to comprehend. Is that why you're here, to threaten me in my own home?" "We're here because you've left us no choice," my father said, his voice rising. "Your stubbornness is forcing our hand." Something in me snapped then. Weeks of grief, stress, and their relentless pressure culminated in a moment of absolute clarity. "No, your greed is forcing your hand. Uncle James knew exactly what he was doing when he left everything to me. He knew I would honor his wishes, not fight over them like vultures circling a carcass." My mother gasped at the imagery, but I continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. "Do you want to know what Uncle James wrote in his letter to me? He said he was leaving me his fortune because I understand what truly matters, because I chose purpose over profit. He wanted his money to amplify the good I'm already doing in the world, not to fund luxury cruises or impress country club friends." "How dare you speak to us this way?" my mother sputtered. "After everything we've done for you." "What have you done?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. When did either of you ever put my happiness above your expectations? When did you ever love me unconditionally, the way Uncle James did? A heavy silence filled the kitchen. My father's face had reddened with anger, while my mother's had paled with shock. They weren't accustomed to me standing my ground so firmly. "If that's how you feel," my father finally said, his voice dangerously quiet, "then perhaps we should take more drastic measures. We have information about your practice, your patient's things that could complicate your professional standing." The threat was so unexpected, so cruel, that it momentarily stole my breath. "You would try to damage my career because I won't give you money you don't need. We would do what's necessary to ensure justice," he replied coldly. In that moment, looking at their faces, I finally accepted a truth I had been resisting for years. These people did not love me. Perhaps they never had, at least not in any way that mattered. They saw me as an extension of themselves, a reflection of their success or failure, but never as an individual worthy of unconditional love. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice steady, despite the turbulence inside me. "Now, and don't come back." "Roxanne," my mother started, but I cut her off. "I mean it. Get out of my house. We're done here. Done completely." "You'll regret this," my father warned as I ushered them toward the door. "When our attorney contacts you next, the terms won't be nearly as generous." I held the door open, standing firm. "Goodbye." As their car pulled it away from my driveway, I didn't feel the satisfaction I had expected, only a profound sadness for what should have been and never was. But beneath the sadness was something else, a sense of liberation. I had finally stopped hoping for the parents I deserved and accepted the reality of the parents I had. It was time to honor Uncle James's faith in me and find a way to transform this painful situation into something meaningful. I just wasn't sure what that would be yet. The confrontation with my parents left me emotionally exhausted, but also strangely liberated. For the first time, I had fully acknowledged the reality of our relationship without making excuses or harboring false hope for change. It was painful but necessary, like lancing an infected wound to begin proper healing. The next morning, I called Dr. Eleanor Matthews, a fellow psychologist who specialized in family trauma. We had collaborated on cases before, and I trusted her professional judgment and personal discretion. "I need to book a session," I told her. "For myself?" There was a brief pause of surprise. "Of course, Roxanne. I have an opening tomorrow at 4 if that works for you." It felt strange sitting on the other side of the therapeutic relationship, becoming the client rather than the clinician. Dr. Matthews's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs positioned to create a sense of safety and openness. "So," she began after we'd settled in, "what brings you here today?" I took a deep breath and started from the beginning, Uncle James's death. The unexpected inheritance, my parents' escalating demands and threats. As I spoke, I found myself delving into childhood memories, patterns of conditional approval, and the constant sense of inadequacy I had carried into adulthood despite my professional success. "I've always known our relationship was damaged," I admitted, "but I think I've been in denial about how toxic it truly is. The inheritance just exposed what was already there." Dr. Matthews nodded thoughtfully. "Money often acts as a magnifying glass for existing dynamics. It rarely creates problems, it reveals them." Our sessions continued weekly, becoming a crucial part of my healing process. With Dr. Matthews's guidance, I began to unravel the complex emotions surrounding my parents: anger at their manipulation, grief for the relationship we never had, guilt over cutting them off despite knowing it was necessary for my well-being. "You're mourning 2 losses simultaneously," Dr. Matthews observed during our 4th session. "Your uncle who provided the unconditional love you deserved, and the idealized version of your parents that you've been hoping might someday materialize." Her words resonated deeply. I had been clinging to a fantasy version of my parents, one where they would eventually recognize my worth beyond achievements and money. Letting go of that illusion was painful but essential. Outside of therapy, my friend Sarah became my rock. She had known me since college and understood the complicated dynamics of my family better than anyone. When I called her in tears after particularly difficult sessions, she would come over with takeout and listen without judgment. "You know what still bothers me?" I confessed to her one evening as we sat on my back porch watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk. "The fact that they're willing to publicly attack me, to threaten my practice, all for money they don't need." Sarah squeezed my hand. "Because it was never about need. It's about control. They can't stand that James gave you this power to choose your own path completely independent of them. It makes me question everything, I admitted. Every memory, every interaction. That's normal, she assured me. But don't let them taint your relationship with James. That was real. Hold on to that. She was right, of course. And it was in remembering Uncle James that I finally found clarity about what to do next. One rainy afternoon, I pulled out the letter he had left me, reading it again with fresh eyes. This money isn't meant to change your life, but to amplify the good you're already doing. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. I began researching charitable foundations, particularly those focused on children's mental health and well-being. I read about various organizational structures, tax implications, and governance models. I spoke with directors of established foundations to understand the challenges and best practices. The more I learned, the clearer my vision became. I could establish a foundation that would provide mental health services to children who couldn't otherwise afford them. A foundation that would train counselors specifically to work with children suffering from emotional neglect and family trauma. A foundation that would fund research into more effective therapeutic interventions for young people. With growing excitement, I expanded my research, setting up meetings with non-profit consultants, impact investment advisors, and child welfare experts. Each conversation refined my vision, adding layers of possibility I hadn't initially considered. The key, advised Maria Rodriguez, a veteran foundation director I consulted, is to create something sustainable that continues your uncle's legacy while addressing needs you personally understand. Your professional background gives you unique insight into what's truly needed in this field. I nodded, thinking about the children in my practice, many of whom came from families that could afford therapy only because of insurance coverage. How many others were suffering silently without access to support? During this period of intense planning and research, I maintained minimal contact with extended family and none with my parents, though I heard through the grapevine that they were still consulting attorneys about challenging the will. Their threats had become background noise as I focused on creating something meaningful from Uncle James's gift. Then, in a moment of inspiration that felt almost like Uncle James whispering in my ear, I had an idea so perfect, so poetically just, that it took my breath away. I immediately called Sarah. I know what I'm going to do, I told her, my voice vibrating with certainty. I'm going to establish the foundation using my parents' names. There was a pause before Sarah responded cautiously. Are you sure that's what you want, linking something so important to people who've hurt you so deeply? It's perfect, I insisted. Think about it. My parents have always been obsessed with their image, their standing in the community. They're threatening me because they want recognition and status as much as they want the money itself. And you're going to give them that recognition, Sarah realized, just not in the way they expected. Exactly. The Gregory and Diane Lawrence Foundation for Children's Emotional Well-Being. They'll get the public acknowledgement they crave, but attached to a cause they can't possibly criticize without looking terrible. It's brilliant, Sarah admitted, but also a little devious. It's justice, I corrected her. They get what they claim to want: recognition and a legacy. The children who need help get services. And I honor Uncle James's wish that his money be used to amplify the good I'm trying to do in the world. What if they try to take control of the foundation since it bears their names? They won't be able to, I assured her. I'm already working with lawyers to create an ironclad structure with an independent board of directors. My parents will have no legal claim or control, just the association of their names with the charitable work. As my plan took shape, I felt a growing sense of purpose and peace. For the first time since Uncle James's death, I was genuinely excited about the future. The inheritance that had brought so much conflict was about to become a force for tremendous good, and in a way that would finally resolve the toxic dynamic with my parents once and for all. I was no longer running from their disapproval or seeking their validation. I was transforming our broken relationship into something healing and constructive, not just for myself, but for countless children who would benefit from the Foundation's work. Uncle James would have approved. In fact, I suspected he might have laughed in appreciation at the elegant solution using my parents' obsession with appearances and recognition to create a lasting legacy of emotional support for children, exactly what they had failed to provide for their own daughter. With renewed energy and determination, I threw myself into making this vision a reality, assembling a team of experts who could help me navigate the complex process of establishing a major charitable foundation. Little did my parents know that their names were about to become synonymous with the very values they had neglected in raising me emotional well-being, unconditional support, and the healing power of genuine love and acceptance. Creating a foundation is not a simple undertaking, as I quickly discovered. It requires navigating complex legal structures, tax regulations, governance issues, and strategic planning. Fortunately, Uncle James's inheritance gave me the resources to assemble an exceptional team of professionals to guide me through the process. My first step was securing Julian Whitman, one of the city's most respected nonprofit attorneys. His firm specialized in establishing charitable foundations, and his reputation for creating robust organizational structures was unmatched. "So," he said during our initial consultation, leaning back in his chair after I'd outlined my vision, "you want to establish a foundation bearing your parents' names without their input or control, using funds they believe they're entitled to." I nodded, waiting for his objection. Instead, he smiled slightly. "It's unusual but legally sound, provided we structure everything correctly. Your uncle left the money to you without conditions. How you choose to use it is entirely your prerogative." "My parents might challenge it," I warned him. "They're already threatening legal action over the inheritance itself. Based on what you've shared about your uncle's will and the precautions his attorney took, their challenge to the inheritance is unlikely to succeed. As for the foundation, once it's established as a separate legal entity with proper governance, they would have no standing to control it simply because their names are attached." Over the next several weeks, I worked closely with Julian and his team to draft the foundation's articles of incorporation bylaws and governance structure. We designed a board of directors composed of child psychology experts, nonprofit leaders, and financial professionals, all with impeccable credentials and a shared commitment to children's mental health. Simultaneously, I partnered with Elaine Cho, a strategic consultant for nonprofits, to develop the foundation's mission, vision, and program areas. Together, we crafted a comprehensive plan focused on 3 key initiatives. First, direct mental health services for children from low-income families, providing access to therapy and support groups at no cost. Second, professional training programs for therapists specializing in childhood trauma and emotional neglect. And third, research grants to advance understanding and treatment of psychological issues affecting children. The beauty of this approach, Elaine explained as we finalized the strategic plan, is its comprehensiveness. You're not just treating symptoms, you're addressing root causes and building capacity within the field. With the legal and strategic frameworks in place, I turned to the financial aspects. Marcus Jenkins, a financial advisor specializing in endowment management, helped me structure the foundation's investments to ensure long-term sustainability. Given the size of the initial endowment, he advised, we can create a portfolio that generates sufficient annual returns to fund your programs in perpetuity while preserving the principal. The pieces were coming together beautifully. Each expert I consulted brought new dimensions to the project, expanding my initial vision into something far more impactful than I had originally imagined. Throughout this process, I maintained complete secrecy about my plans. The only people who knew the details were my professional team bound by confidentiality and Sarah, whom I trusted implicitly. I had heard through family channels that my parents were still consulting attorneys about challenging Uncle James's will, but their threats seemed increasingly hollow as weeks passed without action. 3 months after my confrontation with my parents, the Gregory and Diane Lawrence Foundation for Children's Emotional Wellbeing was officially incorporated. The board of directors held its first meeting approving the mission statement, strategic plan, and initial grant priorities. We leased office space in a professional building downtown, hired an executive director with impressive credentials in nonprofit management, and began developing the foundation's visual identity and communications strategy. Everything was in place for a public launch. After consulting with a public relations firm that specialized in nonprofit work, we scheduled a formal announcement event at the city's most prestigious hotel. Invitations went out to mental health professionals, community leaders, potential partner organizations, and members of the press. I deliberately did not invite my parents or inform them of the foundation's existence. They would learn about it along with the rest of the community. The evening before the launch event, I stood in my home office reviewing my speech one last time. On my desk sat a framed photo of Uncle James smiling broadly during our last hiking trip together. I touched the frame gently, wishing he could be present tomorrow to see his legacy taking shape. "I hope you'd approve," I whispered to his image. "I think you would." Sarah called to check in, sensing my nervous energy. "Everything ready for tomorrow." "As ready as it can be," I replied. The press release is finalised, the presentation is polished, and the executive director is prepared to answer technical questions. And how are you feeling about your parents finding out? I considered this for a moment. Strangely calm. This feels right, Sarah. It's not about revenge or proving a point. It's about creating meaning from all this pain. I'm proud of you, she said softly. James would be too. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I dressed carefully in a professional blue suit, subtle enough not to draw attention away from the foundation's message, but polished enough to convey seriousness of purpose. The event venue was immaculate, with banners displaying the foundation's name and mission statement, nurturing emotional well-being in every child. As attendees began arriving, I greeted them personally, introducing our executive director and board members. Local news crews set up cameras and a photographer circulated capturing the event for press materials. The energy in the room was electric with possibility. At precisely 10 o'clock, I stepped up to the podium, surveying the gathered crowd of professionals, community leaders, and media representatives. Good morning, I began. Thank you all for coming today as we announce the establishment of the Gregory and Diane Lawrence Foundation for Children's Emotional Wellbeing. I outlined the Foundation's mission and key initiatives, sharing statistics about the critical need for mental health services for children and the shortage of specialised providers. I explained how the Foundation would work to fill these gaps through direct services, professional training, and research support. This foundation, I concluded, represents a commitment to ensuring that every child receives the emotional support they need to thrive, that every child knows they are valued not for their achievements, but for their inherent worth as human beings, that every child has access to healing when they experience trauma or neglect. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Questions from the audience focused on implementation details, collaboration opportunities, and application processes for grants and services. The media representatives requested interviews, which I directed primarily to our executive director, while providing brief statements myself. By early afternoon, news of the foundation had spread across local media outlets. Television stations ran segments during their midday broadcasts, newspapers published articles online, and social media began buzzing with shares and supportive comments. It was only a matter of time before my parents would see the announcements. I returned to my office at the foundation, waiting for the inevitable reaction. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 3:17. My father's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He demanded without preamble, his voice tight with fury. "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied calmly. "I assume you've heard about the foundation. Using our names without permission, this is outrageous." "We'll sue you for this, Roxanne. I've already called our attorney." "You're welcome to try," I said, maintaining my composure. "But I should remind you that there's nothing illegal about naming a charitable foundation after someone, particularly when those people are my parents. The paperwork is all properly filed and approved. The board of directors is in place, and the press coverage has been incredibly positive." There was a moment of stunned silence before my mother's voice came on the line, indicating they had me on speakerphone. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" she hissed. "People are calling us, congratulating us on our generosity, asking how long we've been involved in children's mental health. What are we supposed to tell them?" "You could tell them you're proud to have your names associated with such a worthy cause," I suggested. "That supporting children's emotional well-being is a value you've always held dear." "This is your revenge, isn't it?" my father accused. "Making us look foolish when we can't possibly object to a children's charity without appearing heartless." "This isn't about revenge," I corrected him. "It's about creating something meaningful from Uncle James's legacy. You wanted recognition, status, acknowledgement. Now you have it permanently attached to a cause that will help thousands of children receive the emotional support they need." The line went quiet for several seconds. "We'll be at your office in 20 minutes, my father finally said. "Don't leave." They arrived in 18 minutes, both looking immaculately dressed, but visibly agitated. My father's face was flushed with anger, while my mother maintained a brittle smile as they were escorted through the foundation's new offices to my private room. "This is unacceptable," my father began as soon as the door closed behind them. "You can't just appropriate our names for your pet project." I gestured for them to sit. Neither did. "This isn't a pet project," I replied evenly. "It's a $38 million foundation dedicated to providing mental health services to children who desperately need them. children like I once was, growing up in homes where emotional support was conditional or absent. My mother flinched slightly at this, but quickly recovered her composure. If you wanted to establish a foundation, fine. But why use our names without consulting us? It's manipulative and dishonest. Is it? I asked. You've been threatening legal action, damaging my professional reputation, and attempting to coerce me into giving you money you don't need or because you believe you deserve recognition for Uncle James's success. Well, now you have that recognition. Not like this, my father snapped. Then how? I challenged. You wanted a share of the inheritance. This foundation is that share benefiting children who need support, rather than adding to your already comfortable retirement. They exchanged glances momentarily at a loss for words. My mother recovered first. The board of directors, she said, calculating as always. We should have positions on the board, given that it bears our names. The board is already fully constituted with qualified professionals in relevant fields, I explained. However, there are plenty of volunteer opportunities if you're genuinely interested in supporting the foundation's work. My father's expression darkened. You're enjoying this, aren't you, making us look foolish while playing the benevolent philanthropist? I sighed, suddenly tired of the conflict. What I'm enjoying is finally putting Uncle James's money to use in a way that honours his values and helps children who are suffering. The fact that it bears your names isn't about humiliating you. It's about creating a legacy that represents what families should be, what children deserve. For a moment, something flickered in my mother's eyes. Perhaps recognition, perhaps doubt. She looked around the office, taking in the mission statement framed on the wall, the photographs of children. The foundation would serve the professional setting that spoke of serious purpose, rather than petty revenge. You really believe in this, she said, her voice losing some of its edge. With everything in me, I confirmed. And whether you choose to embrace it or fight it, this foundation will proceed with its work. The only question is whether you'll be remembered as supportive figureheads or as opponents of children's mental health services. My father opened his mouth to argue further, but my mother placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. We need time to discuss this privately, she said. I nodded. Take all the time you need. The foundation's first grants will be announced next month, with or without your blessing. They left without further argument, my father rigid with suppressed anger, my mother uncharacteristically thoughtful. As the door closed behind them, I felt no triumph or vindication, only a quiet certainty that I had found the right path forward. Whether my parents would eventually see the wisdom in it remained to be seen, but their reaction no longer determined my peace of mind. Uncle James's legacy would live on in the work of the foundation, transforming the pain of the past into healing for countless children. That was victory enough. The launch of the Gregory and Diane Lawrence Foundation became the most significant turning point in my life, though not in the ways I had initially anticipated. What began as a solution to a family conflict evolved into a profound journey of healing, forgiveness, and unexpected reconciliation. In the days following my confrontation with my parents at the foundation office, media coverage continued to expand. Local stories were picked up by national outlets, framing the foundation as an innovative approach to addressing the critical shortage of mental health services for underserved children. My professional background lent credibility to the mission, while the substantial initial endowment generated excitement about the foundation's potential impact. Through it all, my parents maintained a conspicuous silence. They made no public statements either supporting or opposing the foundation. Their social media accounts, previously active with complaints about their ungrateful daughter, went quiet. I heard through family channels that they had cancelled several social engagements, presumably to avoid questions about their sudden philanthropic venture. 2 weeks after the launch, I received an unexpected email from my mother requesting a private meeting. No attorneys, no accusations, she wrote. Just a conversation. I agreed cautiously, suggesting a neutral location, a quiet tea room downtown that offered private seating areas. When I arrived, my mother was already there, looking uncharacteristically subdued in a simple blouse rather than her usual designer attire. Thank you for meeting me, she said as I took the seat across from her. Your father doesn't know I'm here. This is just between us for now. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a deep breath. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the foundation launch. At first, I was furious, convinced you were deliberately humiliating us. But then I started reading about the programs you're developing, the children you're planning to help. She paused, her hands curling around her teacup. and I realized something uncomfortable. The services you're creating, they're the kind you needed when you were growing up, aren't they? The question caught me off guard. In all our conflicts, my mother had never acknowledged my emotional needs or the ways they had gone unmet. Yes, I admitted quietly. They are. She looked down at her tea. I received a call yesterday from Margaret Whitfield. You remember her, the president of the Women's Philanthropic Alliance. She wanted to invite me to speak at their annual luncheon about our family's commitment to children's mental health. A bitter laugh escaped her. I had no idea what to say. What did you tell her? That I would consider it? She replied, then met my eyes directly. Roxanne, I need to understand. Is this foundation truly about helping children, or is it about punishing your father and me? It started as both. I admitted deciding that honesty was the only path forward. I was angry and hurt by how quickly you both transformed from distant parents into aggressive pursuers of Uncle James's money. But as the foundation took shape, as I worked with experts who understand the desperate need for these services, it became something much more meaningful than a response to our conflict. My mother nodded slowly. Your father still sees it as manipulation, but I'm beginning to see it differently. The foundation, it's addressing a real need, isn't it? A critical one. I confirmed. Do you know that in our city alone, over 60% of children who need mental health services never receive them, that childhood trauma and neglect when left untreated can lead to lifelong struggles with depression, anxiety, addiction? These are children who could thrive if given proper support, but instead they suffer in silence because resources aren't available or accessible. As I spoke, I saw something shift in my mother's expression, a softening perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. I never thought of myself as a neglectful parent, she said quietly. We gave you every material advantage, the best schools opportunities most children never have. I know, I acknowledged, but children need more than material advantages. They need unconditional love, emotional safety, the space to be imperfect without fear of rejection. My mother was silent for several long moments, absently stirring her tea. When she finally spoke again, her voice had lost its defensive edge. The irony is that I parented exactly as I was parented. My mother believed that pushing for perfection was how you showed love, that criticism was motivation, that emotional restraint built character. She shook her head slightly. It never occurred to me there might be another way. This glimpse of self-awareness from my mother was unprecedented. In all our years of conflict, she had never once questioned her parenting approach or considered its impact on me. The Foundation's first initiative, I told her, includes a parent education program. It's designed to help parents understand children's emotional needs and develop healthier communication patterns. It's not about blame, it's about breaking cycles. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Would it be completely inappropriate if I observed one of these programs once they're running? It was the last request I had expected from her. You want to attend a parenting class? Not necessarily participate, she clarified quickly. Just learn. It seems I have a great deal to learn. That conversation marked the beginning of a slow, tentative shift in our relationship. My father remained resistant longer, his pride more deeply wounded by what he still perceived as public manipulation. But my mother's gradual engagement with the Foundation's work eventually influenced him as well. 1 month after the launch, the Foundation awarded its first grants to community mental health centres, specifically for expanding children's services. The press coverage included photographs of the recipient organisations and testimonials from families who would benefit. My phone pinged with a text from my father that evening. The autism support program you funded. That's good work. It wasn't an apology or a reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, however small. 3 months in, my mother volunteered to help organise a fundraising gala that would supplement the Foundation's endowment. Working alongside her on this project, I glimpsed a different woman than the one who had raised me, more reflective, less rigidly perfectionistic, occasionally even vulnerable. I attended one of the parent workshops last week, she confessed as we reviewed catering options. Not as Diane Lawrence, just as an anonymous participant. It was illuminating. In what way? I asked, curious. The facilitator talked about how children interpret criticism, how even well-intentioned correction can be internalized as conditional love. Kasi. She met my eyes briefly before looking away. I've been thinking about some of the things I said to you growing up. How they must have sounded from your perspective. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a recognition that had never existed before. 6 months after the foundation's establishment, we completed construction on our first major project, a comprehensive children's mental health centre in an underserved neighbourhood. The facility would provide therapy, psychiatric services, family counselling and support groups, all at no cost to families who couldn't afford private care. The ribbon-cutting ceremony attracted significant attention. As executive director of the foundation, I was expected to speak, but I had also planned a surprise. After my remarks about the centre's services and the children, it would help I introduced the namesakes of our foundation, Gregory and Diane Lawrence. My parents looked startled as they were invited to the podium, clearly not expecting public acknowledgement. My father adjusted his tie nervously. My mother smoothed her already immaculate hair. Neither had prepared remarks, but my mother stepped forward and spoke from the heart. When this foundation was first established, she began, her voice slightly unsteady. My husband and I were taken by surprise. We didn't fully understand the vision or purpose behind it. She paused, gathering herself. In the months since we have received an education, not just about children's mental health needs, but about our own shortcomings as parents. A murmur rippled through the audience. This candid admission was far from the polished image my mother had maintained throughout her social life. The work this foundation is doing, she continued, represents the kind of support all children deserve. Support that I regret to say we didn't always provide to our own daughter. She turned slightly toward me, her eyes moist. But we're learning, albeit late in life, that it's never too late to acknowledge mistakes and try to do better. My father stepped forward, then placing his hand on my mother's shoulder. We are honoured, he said, his voice gruff with suppressed emotion, to have our names associated with this important work. And we are proud of our daughter for creating something so meaningful. The word proud hung in the air between us, a word I had spent decades longing to hear from him. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back, maintaining my professional composure as the ceremony continued. But later, as we toured the facility together, my father fell into step beside me, away from the main group. James chose well, he said quietly so only I could hear. When he left everything to you, he knew what you would do with it. Thank you for saying that, I replied equally softly. He nodded once, briskly, emotion not coming easily to him even now. Your mother and I have been discussing our estate planning. We'd like to include a provision for the foundation in our wills. Not that it needs the money, but as a statement of support. 1 year after Uncle James's death, the Gregory and Diane Lawrence Foundation had directly served over 500 children, trained dozens of therapists in specialised techniques for childhood trauma, and funded 3 research projects investigating innovative treatment approaches. The initial endowment had grown through careful management and additional fundraising, ensuring sustainability for decades to come. My relationship with my parents would never be perfect. Too much water had flowed under that bridge, too many years of emotional distance and unmet needs. But we had found a new way to relate, not as the perfect family they had once pretended we were, but as flawed individuals working together on something larger than ourselves. On the anniversary of Uncle James's passing, I visited his grave alone, bringing a bouquet of wildflowers, like the ones we used to photograph on our hikes. You were right, I told him, sitting on the grass beside his headstone. The money wasn't meant to change my life, but to amplify the good I was trying to do. I think it's done even more than that. It's healing wounds I thought would never close. The foundation continues to grow and evolve. My parents now serve on an advisory committee, bringing their business expertise to support our executive team. My mother regularly attends parenting workshops, sometimes sharing her own journey of realizing how her parenting style affected me. My father has become an unexpected advocate for fathers' involvement in children's emotional development, speaking to business groups about balancing career ambition with family needs. As for me, I've found purpose and peace in ways I never anticipated. The inheritance that once seemed like a burden of responsibility has become a gift far beyond its monetary value. It gave me the means to create meaningful change in children's lives, but more importantly, it created a pathway to healing within my own family. Uncle James, in his final act of generosity, didn't just leave me his money. He gave me the opportunity to transform pain into purpose, conflict into contribution, and ultimately to find reconciliation where I had only expected more heartbreak. The true inheritance wasn't the $38 million. It was the lesson that even our deepest wounds can become sources of healing for others, and sometimes unexpectedly for ourselves as well. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ended up bringing unexpected healing to your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about turning pain into purpose. And remember, sometimes the most powerful legacy we can leave is not what we give, but what we forgive. Thank you for listening, and I wish you peace on your own journey of healing.